All right guys, welcome to the video where we are going to be discussing everything you need to do in order to build six-pack abs. Now we've decided to break this up into two videos. Part one is going to be everything that you need to know about diet, and part two is going to be everything you need to know about training your abs correctly. So the reason for this video is that we have recently released an ebook which covers all of this information in depth, and you can find that ebook in the description of this video. But we know that not everybody likes reading, so we've decided to also make a video with some visual cues in it as well. And we know some people would much rather, learn that way rather than going through all of the ebook, which I think is about 40 pages. But it is a lot more in depth. So if you do want the in-depth info, be sure to check that out. In these videos, we are going to try and keep it pretty simple and just go over all of the basic information. So what's the reason for launching this ebook and this video in the first place? Well, we just get asked about this a lot. How do I get abs? What do I need to do in order to get abs? Now, while abs themselves aren't the pinnacle of health and fitness or isn't the main thing that you should be focusing on, it is still a pretty common question. And we see a lot of people go about this the wrong way. They see that summer's coming, so they start this little panic shred. They start trying to do hundreds of sit-ups and all this sort of thing, thinking that's what they need to do in order to build and show their abs, when that isn't necessarily the case. So we just want to put out some information and show people the exact things that they need to do in order to do it correctly. And before we get into the topic for this video, which is going to be all about diet, I do just want to say that in the description of this video, you will find a link with a free trial to our training app where you'll see our free abs training program, which you can sign up for. You can try out all of the features in that app and see everything there. So I'm going to go through all the info, everything you can do, but just know that that is all in the one place. So definitely check that out. So today's video, part one, we're discussing everything diet related. Now, why are we starting with this? Well, diet is the most important aspect of seeing your abs. Now, even if you do all of the right training and you train your abs every single day and you do thousands of sit-ups, all of that is going to be pointless if your body fat percentage is too high. And the only way to lower your body fat percentage is to eat in a calorie deficit, which means you're going to have to focus on making changes to your diet. One of the biggest mistakes that we see people make is thinking that they need to make changes to the type of training they're doing, as they think that is the reason that they don't have visible abs, when in most cases that just isn't the case. It's because of your diet and it's because of your body fat percentage. The reason that your abs aren't visible isn't because of a lack of sit-ups, it's because you aren't lean enough. So how do we go about getting lean? Well, losing fat and getting lean almost always means weight loss. And weight loss means that we need to be in a calorie deficit. So really quickly, I want to go over how do we actually get into a calorie deficit, what macros should we be eating when in a deficit, and three, how long is this all going to actually take? So how do we create a calorie deficit? And if this is new to you and you haven't heard of this term before, it essentially means that we are eating less calories than what we're burning on a daily basis for a consistent period of time. Okay, so let's just say that your daily calorie energy expenditure is around 3,000 calories per day. So that is the amount of calories that you're burning each and every day. In order to be in a deficit, you just need to eat less than that number. So that could be 2,800 calories per day. It could be 1,500 calories per day. So long as you eat fewer calories than what you're burning, you are going to be in a calorie deficit. So what does it mean to be in a calorie deficit? Since you're consuming fewer energy than what your body requires, it's going to need to break down muscle and fat tissue in order to get the energy that it needs to complete its daily tasks. In other words, you lose weight. So what are the steps you need to follow in order to create a calorie deficit? First thing you need to do is determine what your maintenance calories are. Now, you can do this using a calculator online. I've put a link for one of those calculators in the description of this video, and that is going to give you your maintenance calories. It's going to use this based off of your age, your height, your weight, and your activity levels. Now, what we need to do in order to determine our deficit number is subtract 15 to 20% from this number. So let's say I go online and I use the calculator and I determine my maintenance calories to be 2,000 calories per day. In order to create a deficit, I need to subtract either 15 or 20%. So let's just say I minus 20% from that number. All right, 20% of 2,000 is going to equal 400. All right, so my new calorie deficit target is going to be 1,600 calories per day. So if I eat 1,600 calories per day for a consistent period of time, I'm going to be in a deficit, which means I'm going to lose weight. Now, if you just focus on this step alone and you stick to that number, chances are you will lose weight. But in order to make our abs visible, we want to make sure that the majority of that weight, if not all of it, is coming from body fat alone. We do want to have a look at where those calories are coming from and what macronutrients we're consuming. But to still keep it really simple, all we need to do is focus on how much protein we're getting, how much carbs and fats isn't going to make a difference to our body composition as long as we're hitting that calorie deficit number. So again, because I like keeping things really simple and I don't like to overcomplicate things, we want to make sure we're consuming around 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. And like I said, I like to keep things really easy and really simple, so I usually just focus on 2. That means whatever my body weight is, I'm going to times it by 2, and that is going to be how much protein I need to be consuming each day. So if I weigh 80 kilos, times that by 2, that's going to equal 160 grams of protein. So as long as I eat 1,600 calories per day and I'm getting 160 grams of protein, there is a very strong chance, very strong likelihood that I'm going to be losing weight, and the majority of that weight is going to be coming from body fat alone. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. I do want to try and keep things simple in this video, and if you'd like me to talk a little bit more in depth about that, then I can definitely do another video in the future. But there's still 2 more things that we need to do. 1, we need to determine how we're going to track whether this is working or not. And 2, we need to determine how long this is all going to take. So how do we determine if this is working or not, and if we're actually losing weight and making progress? Well, we track our progress. And there are 4 main ways that we can do this. 1 is to measure our body weight. 2 is to take progress photos. 3 is to take body measurements. And 4 is doing something a little bit more technical, like a body scan. Now, the biggest mistake that I see people make when tracking their body weight is just doing it randomly. What we want to focus on doing is weighing in every single day and then trying to do it in the same conditions as often as possible. So that might mean first thing in the morning when you wake up, you go and weigh yourself, and then we'll record this number. Now, we're not just comparing the day-to-day number. What we want to do is we want to take the average of the week and then compare the average of one week to the next week and so on. Because weight loss isn't linear, there's going to be ups and downs, and your body weight is going to fluctuate due to a number of different reasons. These numbers are going to change quite a lot, but if we focus on tracking the average across each week, then it's going to be a much better indication if we're making progress or not. Now, body weight isn't the only number that we want to focus on, but it is going to be the easiest one to track, and it's going to be the quickest one that we can do. Whereas photos and measurements are going to give us a little bit more of an accurate representation of what's going on, but it is actually going to take a little bit longer for those changes to occur. So I recommend taking progress photos, just a standard front, back, and side shot, every 4 to 6 weeks. Same with body measurements. You can measure things like your chest, your hips, your waist, your arms, and your legs. And the 4th option is doing something like a body scan, either on something like a DEXA machine or a in-body scanner, which is going to give you a lot more of an accurate representation of how much body fat mass and how much fat-free mass that you actually have. Obviously, these can be a little bit harder to get done, and you may have to actually go somewhere and pay for them and whatever. But again, it can be a really another useful tool to make sure you're tracking your progress and make sure you're actually making progress. So the key here is to just make sure you are tracking your progress to ensure that you know whatever you're doing is actually working. Another really important factor to consider is to make sure that you actually give it time. Whenever you implement any sort of change, it isn't going to be instant. So if I start eating in a calorie deficit, I'm not going to see results in a few days. Try to give it at least a good few weeks before you actually start to notice any changes occurring. What I like to try and do is try and remain as consistent as possible for a 4 to 5 week period. And only then, if I haven't seen any changes or seen enough changes, will I only make changes to my diet or the approach that I'm taking. What I usually say to people is that the first 4 to 5 weeks are the hardest because it can be really hard to make any progress or see any progress. But once you do start to see progress, that can be a lot more motivating, and it can be a good sign that what you're doing is working, so you're more likely to stick with it. So as long as you go in with the mindset knowing that those first 4 to 5 weeks are going to be really tough, and you can push through that, and then you start to see the changes, then you're more likely to keep going. Which brings me to my next point. How long is all of this going to take? Now, this is arguably the most important point. Why? Because you need to set realistic expectations. If you go into this thinking that it's just going to take a couple of weeks and you can lose 10 kilos in 4 weeks, if the expectation isn't realistic, then whenever you try and implement these changes, you're not going to succeed. And even if you're doing the right things and doing everything perfectly, because your expectations were so high and you can't meet them, you're going to think that what you're doing actually isn't working, which is going to cause you to stop and give up and then try something new. And eventually people just keep repeating this cycle where they make no progress whatsoever. So hopefully we can educate you here to set the right expectations, which means you stick to the plan, you keep going, and you make the progress that you desire. So let's actually talk about and work out how long all of this can take. Now we can do this by using some simple maths, because we know that 1 kilo of body fat is equal to roughly 7,700 calories. It's not perfect, but it is a rough number and it can give us a rough estimate. Now, like we worked out before, if I was eating in a calorie deficit of say roughly 400 calories per day, then all I need to do is divide 7,700 by 400, which is going to give me, I think, roughly 19.5 days to lose that 1 kilo of body fat, which is roughly 3 weeks. And this equals roughly 0.3 kilos per week. So now I've got a realistic target and number that I can work towards. But we have to keep in mind that this is taking into consideration that I am in a perfect deficit of 400 calories every single day. That means I'm burning the same amount of calories every single day, I'm eating the same amount of calories every single day, and all the conditions are absolutely perfect, which isn't always going to be the case, and it's something that we have to keep in mind. Some days we actually might burn more calories, some days we might burn less, some days we might eat more calories and eat less. You know, maybe something pops up on the weekend, maybe you have a social occasion where you eat a little bit more. All of these factors we have to consider. So is this all going to be the perfect case scenario every single day? Chances are it's not, and this might change these numbers around a little bit. So while this can give us a good estimate, it doesn't mean it's going to be absolutely spot on, which is something that we have to keep in mind. Now you're probably thinking like, fuck, I have to do all of this maths. You actually don't have to do any of this. This is just to give you a demonstration of how we can set some expectations and give us a better understanding of how long this is all going to take. Because the biggest mistake that I see people make, like I talked about before, is that they think that they can actually do it a lot quicker than what's actually possible. Like if you thought you could go into this and lose 10 kilos in 4 weeks, well, based on that math, that would almost be impossible and be really, really hard to do. So if you do start making progress like this, but you're expecting it to be a lot higher, then you're going to feel disappointed when we've actually just worked out that this is actually a pretty realistic and achievable target. So this is really important to know because it's going to help keep you consistent. So how long is this all going to take? Is it going to be 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months, a year? Well, chances are for men, in order to have visible abs, they're going to need a body fat percentage of anywhere between 6 to 14%. And for women, it's going to be likely 14 to 20%. So chances are, if you're a male who has a body fat percentage of 25% and higher, or a female of 30% and higher, it could take 1 to 2 years for your abs to become visible. If you're a male with 18 to 25% or a female with 25 to 30% body fat, then it could take anywhere from 6 months up to a year. A male with 14% to 18% and a female with 20% to 25% could take up to 3 to 6 months. And males with less than 14% and females with less than 20% could take anywhere from 1 to 3 months. So if you are on the higher end and it is going to take you a little while, don't be disheartened because you can still do all of this. Everything that we discuss in this video and what I discuss in the next video, you just have to do it over a slightly longer time horizon. And I always suggest trying to break it up into chunks and phases rather than trying to do it all at once. And this is what I call nutritional periodization. Essentially what we are doing is breaking up our diet into phases, so we're making it more sustainable. So if it is going to take you longer than a year, what I always suggest to most people is to break it up into phases rather than trying to do it in one big hit. What that might look like is breaking it up into 12-week phases. And this is because it is a much more sustainable approach. We can factor in times when we're dieting and we can factor in times when we're not dieting. Chances are if we just try and do it all in one big go, we're going to give up at some point because it's going to get really difficult and really hard to stick to the diet. But if we factor in these diet breaks, it's going to make it a little bit more sustainable. So we might focus on dieting for 12 weeks, and then we might focus on maintaining for 12 weeks, and then we might go into another diet phase, and then a maintenance phase, and so on and so on. And what happens over time is that our weight will slowly decrease and we'll get closer towards our goal. And when we break it up into chunks like this, it actually makes it seem much more achievable. Now I could go into a lot more detail about diet tips and things that we could be doing to make our diet more sustainable and food choices and all that sort of stuff, but I might leave that for a future video. So if you do want to see something like that, be sure to let me know. But in the next video, I'm going to be discussing everything we need to do that is training related in order to train and build our abs. I'm going to cover the specific exercises that you need to be doing, the ones you need to be avoiding, and I'm going to offer you a free training plan that you can follow from the video. Be sure to check that video out, and I hope you found this one useful.